These are your March-April announcements. Join us each weekday morning at 6 a.m. for morning meditation and continue at Tuesdays at 7 p.m. for legislative and justice conversations, followed by Pastor and the I Will series. And on Sunday, join us for CLA at 8 a.m. It's about that time. Join us for He's Alive. It's Lenten season. Pick up your copy at the church and join us in April for the Easter experience for the family. And we will also have a walkthrough Passion Week experience. Thank you for everyone who has completed connection groups. They had a wonderful time, and there is still time for you to join us for our march for the gift of serving, the gift of shepherding, and the gift of teaching. Continue to follow the pastor on his Facebook page, Instagram, and Twitter, as well as the church. Stay connected with us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. These have been your March-April announcements.
Grace and peace, we greet you in the name of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. I'm excited about this opportunity to be able to come into your house again and to share with you some of the exciting things that are happening not only here at First Baptist Church of Vienna, but certainly to share with you some of the exciting things that are happening right here in Fairfax County. Many of you know that several weeks ago, we celebrated our Justice and Legislative Sunday. And of course, COVID has changed how we have been able to do things this particular year. But I'm excited that in addition to Justice and Legislative Sunday, we have been engaged in justice and legislative conversations. That's right. This is part of our series of our justice and legislative conversations. And today, I don't have one guest, but I have two very special guests that I'm excited to be able to welcome to First Baptist Church of Vienna and just to be able to dialogue with them. They're no strangers to First Baptist, and they are no strangers to Fairfax County. They are members of the Board of Supervisors, Fairfax County. They're both serving in their very first term, and I'm excited and delighted to introduce Supervisor Rodney Lusk as well as Supervisor Walter Alcorn. Thank you so much, supervisors, for joining me this afternoon and for being a part, making time in your schedule to just dialogue about issues that are important to you. As I've mentioned, this particular series is really birthed out of our Justice and Legislative Sunday. While that took place several weeks ago, we have been airing conversations throughout this month and to just highlight some of the work in areas of justice and particular legislation that's important not only to the members of First Baptist, but that's important to the members of this particular community. And I've had an opportunity to talk with you both one-on-one. You're both engaged in some exciting things. As I've said, you know, some of those things we agree wholeheartedly on. Some of those things we don't necessarily agree with, but we find ways to mutually work together.
We do.
And so let's just begin this conversation. And I'll start with Supervisor Lusk, just to tell us a little bit about who you are, the work of the supervisors, and some of the committees that you're working on at this particular time.
Okay, so thank you very much for having me here today. Delighted to be here with you.
Thank you.
And my colleague, Walter Alcorn. Walter and I are buddies from college. I've known this guy since my second year in college.
Wow.
He's the same person then as he is today. And it's
You
my
guys
pleasure.
go back a long way.
We do. That hasn't been yesterday.
All right.
Not quite yesterday.
Not quite. Right.
A little longer.
Right.
So we're excited to both serve on the Board of Supervisors. So background very quickly.
Yes.
I'm a native Virginian, went to T.C. Williams High School, went to University of Virginia with Walter, spent my entire career, 30 years working in Fairfax County government.
Wow, so you have an interesting lens upon which you look through.
I would say different from probably any other member of the board in terms of the service that I've had. So I worked for two members of the board, Kate Hanley and Jerry Conley. They were both at the time.
Two very prominent members of the board.
Yes, extremely prominent and extremely successful and just great mentors, both of them, and just so delighted to have the opportunity.
Great.
Second, I worked in human services for a number of years. Got to work in the historic Richmond Highway corridor during provision, direct service. So I understand the pain and the difficulty for those who are in need, and the difficulty of them getting access to the services, and the difficulty of them getting off of assistance once they come I worked in economic development after that for 21 years. So
Wow.
my job was to basically go out and promote Fairfax County across the United States. Had a team of 13 folks.
Wow.
Managed an office in California, managed an office in Boston, and my job was to recruit. And I recruited some of the
Wow.
largest companies to this county over that time. I think if I look at my stats, it was probably over 300 plus companies that I personally, not my team,
Right,
I personally
right,
recruited.
right.
And they represented a little more than about 10 million square feet and over 36,000 jobs. So companies like Capital One, Amazon Web Services, Microsoft, just to name a few. So that experience.
Just a few big ones.
Just a few. So, and then I also work with small ones too.
Yeah.
I mean, I got to be clear in saying that, and Walter can acknowledge this, in my early tenure at the EDA, I was the venture capital person. So what I did was go out and recruit venture capital investment to Fairfax County. I worked with small companies, and even Walter started a company here in Fairfax County many, many years ago. So that experience, as well as my service on the Planning Commission, which I also did with Walter, and on the Park Authority Board, led me to think about what could I do in support of my community. And for those who might not know, I live with my grandparents. I grew up with them. My grandparents were just salt of the earth people, taught me some important lessons. One, you know, if you make a commitment, you got to honor it.
Right.
So if you say you're going to do something, you better do it. If you live in the community, you have a responsibility to be of service to that community. You don't just get to get a pass. You don't get to be there and not participate. And if you see someone in pain, or if you see someone suffering or in need, you have a responsibility to help them. So those three lessons are the ones I carry. The legacy for them, I try to teach others, and I also try to reflect in my own life.
Wow.
So the big decision came. I made the decision to run, and this is something I consulted Walter on as well, is I thought about the county. And if you look at the way the county is developed, we have a lot of construction, a lot of development, a lot of industries in the northern and western parts of the county. So if you think Tysons, Reston, Herndon, they've been extraordinarily successful.
Right.
They have lots of infrastructure, lots of jobs, lots of investment. You look at the southeastern portion of Fairfax County, and you
Not
see
the same
the opposite.
story.
So here I am thinking, okay, if I want to see a change, then I need to be a part of helping that change occur. So I've got to do something to make that happen. Otherwise, I'm going to have to just say it's going to continue to be the way it is.
Right.
At the EDA, I love my job. I was effective at my job, but I knew if I was going to make a difference here in southeastern Fairfax County, I had
You had
to
to
run.
do something different.
That's why I ran. That was the major draw, the major reason that I felt compelled to get into the race. And that's an issue I've been working on pretty diligently since I got here.
That's powerful. Before you get into
I'll wait.
some of the other work, let's just let Walter tell us a little bit about who he is, how we got to this moment,
Definitely.
and then we'll dive into some of the issues.
Well,
Definitely.
first of all, I have to say I'm very proud to serve on the Board of Supervisors with this guy right here because, you know, he said something nice about me that I haven't changed in however many years it's been, but this guy's the same way, you know, in terms of commitment to service,
Right.
a commitment to others, and just to making the community a better place.
Yeah.
I think Rodney and I do share that.
We do.
As motivation.
That's why we're such good friends, Walter.
Well, that's true.
I mean, our core values are the same.
That's true.
Yep.
That's true. So I did come at it slightly different path. Our paths did overlap.
Yep.
Certainly on the Planning Commission, I served 16 years on the Fairfax County Planning Commission. So I have had a little bit of a focus on development, land use planning, and zoning, and that kind of thing.
That's right.
So I'm still motivated by that. The district that I represent is the Hunter Mill District, which includes Reston, also here, the town of Vienna.
Right.
Yeah.
In Reston, we have had a lot of development. There's been a lot going on on the economy, or in the economy there.
Yeah.
But not everybody has benefited
Right.
from that economic activity. And that's one of the things that has motivated me and also is the focus of some of the activities that we'll maybe talk about here,
That's right.
here in a little bit. But aside from that, I actually got my start in Kate Hanley's office, Providence District
Oh, wow.
Supervisor.
Wow. Didn't know that.
I did.
Okay.
I did. Right out of UVA.
Okay.
And worked there for a few years. And when I was working there, there was actually there was an environmental spill. There was a tank farm spill.
That's right.
The Fairfax City Tank Farm,
Yeah.
Star Enterprises, basically underground petroleum product.
Wow.
Yeah.
Got under the Mantua neighborhood,
Yeah.
which happened to be the neighborhood of Jerry Connolly. And Jerry was the president of the Mantua
Wow.
Citizens Association. Anyway, long story short,
Yep.
that got me into the environmental area. And I since have made a career on the private sector side working on environmental issues. So first at SAIC,
Yep.
and then as a consultant of my own
That's right.
business, and then more recently
Yep.
with the Consumer Technology Association doing environmental affairs.
Great.
So in parallel with that,
Yep.
community service, planning commission.
That's right.
I also did the Park
Park Authority.
Wow.
That's right.
So anyway, different paths, but we're
Right.
now.
But
serving back on the same page.
you've ended up on the bench together.
We have.
That's right.
And,
Once again.
right. Different paths, but
Right.
but you're connected.
That's right.
We are.
And so you're engaged in some great work. Both of you have talked about,
Yes.
your perspectives and what brought you to the work.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned, your core values are
Right.
very, very similar.
Yep.
So let's just jump in. We are hopefully coming off of the. I'd like to say we're finished with COVID-19, but not
No,
quite finished
no.
with COVID-19. I don't know if we'll ever be finished with COVID-19. But
That's
needless
right.
to say,
right.
the last 2 years have been extremely challenging.
Right.
They've provided, COVID-19 provided an opportunity for
Yeah.
the county to really demonstrate its skill set.
That's right.
In terms of keeping people safe, the
Correct.
economy, housing, a number of issues
That's right.
were just brought to the forefront as a result of COVID-19.
That's right.
So let's start. Let me hear from you.
Yeah.
What grade would you give yourselves in terms of tackling these issues related to COVID-19?
Yeah, how about this? Let me take them in specific silos. So I'd say food insecurity.
Okay.
Became really clear once the pandemic hit how difficult it was for families to be able to provide for their own food needs.
Right.
We saw the food pantries have an 8-fold increase in their requests right after March of 2020.
Wow.
I personally realize that in my district, which includes Richmond Highway on the western side, Richmond Highway on the eastern side is in Mount Vernon district. Many of my residents are African American, Latinx. They are in islands of disadvantage. They have incomes that probably look more like $50,000 per year in aggregate versus the county's $125,000 a year in aggregate.
Right.
The jobs that these folks were working in at the time, mostly retail, hospitality, and guess what? Which
Those
of
are the jobs
those?
that shut down.
Those are the jobs that closed first, and those folks didn't have any savings. Those folks didn't have any food. So personally, this goes back to my grandparents. I said this earlier to you, and this is something I believe. I saw people suffering in my own community, and I made a commitment myself, not even with the county, that I was going to do something to help address that food insecurity. So we went out and met with a number of nonprofits, and then I also worked with 2 private sector companies to provide, over the course of the last 2 years, 3 million pounds of food.
Wow.
3 million pounds of food
Wow.
in food distributions that we had car lines as long as 2 miles
Wow.
at a time.
Wow.
And we would see the same people coming back week. We did this every week.
Wow.
Every week.
Wow. Wow.
So I learned and saw that there were some things that need to be done, and I will give credit to the county. So back to the grading process. Once we realized that we were going to get the infusion of capital from the federal government, we made it clear that we were going to need to address a number of these very important issues. So we need to give money to our not-for-profits. We gave them roughly $25 million in the first tranche. I won't give out everything. I'll leave something here for Walter. And then maybe what I'll jump to in the second sort of iteration is what we did with regard to small business. So we had an opportunity to talk about how do we support the companies that are suffering as a part of this. We knew that the federal government had their PPP loan program and a number of their other programs, but guess what? That money was going to larger corporations. It was not going to the small companies. So when we set up our program, and Walter and I were both banging on the table, because in the first iteration, I was almost sitting there. I got my little piece of paper out. $1 million. And I said,
program.
and I was like, wait a minute. First thing I said is, we're only going to be able to help if we're lucky, I don't know, 50,
yeah.
50 companies here. And then I
You
said,
challenged them to stretch.
oh gosh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
And then I talked to John Faust, and
Right.
that's when the stretch happened.
Okay.
So
Okay.
we got up to 25 million in that first tranche, and that program was specifically designed to support, and this was at the request that we made,
That's right.
said small, women, minority, and veterans.
Wow.
And then I said, can we have a percentage? And they says, we've never had a percentage on any of these. Went to the county attorney.
We did.
Went to the county attorney and said, can we have a percentage that we can designate specifically to these specific groups? And she goes, well, what's the number that you think would be good? And I says, at least a third. I just came up with a
Right.
number, at least a third. So it turns out that we could. So we did the at least a third. Turned out 69%. 69%
Wow.
of the money went to women-owned, veteran-owned,
Right.
minority-owned, and other
That's powerful.
companies. Unbelievable. In the end, I think our number was about 55 million. So we
Okay.
added additional funds to support those types of businesses.
Many of those companies probably would not have survived without
exactly it.
that influx of
That's
capital. and
that's
cash.
exactly right. We got letters from a number of those companies, and they said exactly that.
Wow.
That this was the thing that helped them support their employees because
Right.
we allowed them to use the money to cover salaries
Right.
and then other operations. And they were so grateful because they were like, I didn't know how we were going to be able to go any longer. Some of them were at the last, breaking point
Wow.
for their businesses. So,
That's powerful.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I know you've got some
He's
other
got some.
Yeah,
ideas
just-
to throw in there,
Well,
right?
and I'll start at the end,
Okay.
which I think we would get a good grade. I'd say
Yeah.
maybe an A minus
I'll-
on this. It's
I-
the overall vaccination rate.
Yes.
Fairfax County actually has a higher vaccination rate than any other county in the Commonwealth.
Okay.
Yep.
So that overall, very good.
It is.
Very good. Now, I'll back up a little bit.
Right.
We did have some challenges early on.
You did.
I chair the Board of Supervisors IT committee, also the Transportation Committee.
Yeah.
But one of the things we struggled with very early on was vaccination sign up.
That's
And
right.
I don't know, it's been a while, and I
Yeah.
think a lot of people remember, but
Yeah.
we had a situation emerge where people had to go online,
Right.
sign up, get registered so they could then
I
be
remember.
invited.
That's
Yes,
right. I remember.
to get the vaccine,
Yeah.
and the system crashed.
Right.
So
Yeah.
we had to get through that. We had to basically figure
Right.
out how can we make the system robust enough.
That's right.
And then we had to make sure that actually the vaccine was getting to everybody that needed it.
Access.
Not just access, exactly. Not just people that had the time and the ability to get online and to go and
Right.
go and go and go and go and try again. Or,
Yeah, technology,
Or
Walter.
stay on the phone. That's right.
Right, that's
Yeah.
what you need.
That's exactly right.
That's right.
So, we also struggled a little bit earlier on testing.
Okay.
Now, everybody did.
Right.
This was a worldwide problem in the
That's right.
U.S. But through all of those, we had to adapt. And
Right.
that's one of the things, that certainly Rodney and I were very much
Sure.
pushing
Right.
along the way
Yes.
to make
Well-
sure that we were getting to people that really needed it.
Yeah.
And frankly, in
That's
an
right.
equitable way.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
let me just
That's a good
put a
point.
pin there and,
Yep.
and thank you both
Yep.
for your support
Yes.
in terms of identifying how important the faith community
Yes.
could
exactly
be
right.
in this process.
That's exactly
and
right.
many of us, open up our doors. We championed to open the doors, and we were able to,
Yeah, and thank you for that.
help a number of
Yes.
people, particularly,
Yes.
those in the African American community, Latinx community,
That's right.
Yes.
who did not have the same kind of access, and quite frankly, tons of seniors who
Right.
just could not navigate the system.
Exactly.
So I appreciate
Well,
that.
You beat me to it because I was gonna give a shout out to
Right.
First Baptist.
That's
Well,
right.
I appreciate it.
Because
Yep.
you have stepped up and played that role.
That's right.
Actually, before the system was in place, you were pointing out that the system needed to be in place.
That's right.
And you volunteered,
Yeah.
raised your hand,
Yep.
and brought people together so
Right.
they could get vaccinated, and made a difference. So thank
Yeah.
I
you.
said, we're here.
Yes.
Use us. Help.
That's
Let us help
exactly
you.
right.
No.
And I think that there are other areas of mutual interest where we
That's
can
right.
could certainly be helpful to
Correct.
each other. So I appreciate that. Let's talk a little bit about housing.
Yes.
And one would think, just given the nature and the dynamics, demographics of Fairfax County, very affluent community.
Yeah.
Somebody who drives through would say, "Oh, wow,
Yeah.
everybody here is doing well." But that's not necessarily
not
the case.
true.
There's There are issues surrounding housing
Yes.
that existed even before COVID.
Yeah.
COVID has just exacerbated some of the issue.
Yeah.
And even homelessness.
Yeah.
I was at a conference just prior to COVID-19
Right.
in Arizona.
Okay.
And I'm sitting in this conference and they're talking about the urbanization of suburbia.
Yeah.
Right.
And they used Fairfax County
Yeah.
as
Interesting.
an illustration.
Got it.
And I'm sitting there
Right.
literally with my mouth wide open. I'm
Right.
listening to this report.
Right.
So, how,
Yeah.
how are we addressing this issue of affordable housing? There
Yeah.
are people who work here who cannot afford
Yeah.
to live here. Many of our members now,
Yes.
Right.
as they age, they are looking to move into Loudoun and Prince
That's right.
William.
That's right.
That's right.
So,
Yeah. I mean, I'll start on
Yeah.
it, and then I'll let Walter hop into this too, because he's got a lot of issues and thoughts
Uh-huh.
himself. But I'll start by saying one of the areas that we have focused on, particularly in Lee, and we're looking at across the county, is the use of public space
Yes.
and
Yes.
land
Yes.
Okay.
to build affordable housing.
Exactly.
So, give you two examples in Lee. One, under construction right now, is a senior living facility that will serve residents 55 and up
Right.
who make between 30 and 60% of area median.
okay.
That is unbelievable. And the reason it can be at 30%, that's extremely low when you think about providing affordable housing. It can be at 30% because we took what was a former stormwater management facility that was owned by VDOT, got control of it at the county, made an underground stormwater system, and we're going to build on top of that this
Wonderful.
affordable housing. So 150 units in partnership
Right.
with a nonprofit provider who Walter knows very, very well, APA,
Okay.
Arlington Partnership for Affordable Housing. Even though they've done all of their work principally in Arlington, they're now looking at Fairfax. So it looks
Right.
like they might need to change their name to the Fairfax
Right.
Affordable
Right.
Housing Partnership.
Right.
But the beauty is that's one project. I'm in the throes right now, and Walter and I have had several conversations about this. So my own office, where I have my supervisor's office, is going to be relocated in 2024. I found out about this. Also is co-located in that office is a police station, the Franconia District Station. So in that co-location, I asked what's going to happen with that office space. And the answer was it's going to be sold. And I raised my hand, and again, I said, okay, what about this being used for affordable housing?
Right.
The county says, okay, we can look at that. So I started going out and talking to folks in the community, and I got to tell you, not positive, Pastor Walton.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
I've
Wow.
gotten comments like, you're bringing a homeless shelter to our community. I've gotten comments like, you're going to have kids there who are on free and reduced lunch. So and Walter and I have talked about this. I'm pretty good about keeping myself kind of under control when people
Right.
say things that I don't agree with and that kind of are incendiary. But after this woman made that comment about the free and reduced lunch, I took it upon myself to say, I just want to share something with you about me personally. I don't think you know this.
Right.
But I was on free and reduced lunch, and I was on the free part of it, just so you know.
Yeah.
And I could see the room, because
Yeah.
there was about 80 people in the room when she made that comment, and there were several people who their heads went down. So I think we've got to do a lot on education with regard to these types of facilities, and I think to the point you raised earlier, how can you and other members of the clergy help us
Right.
in messaging and help us in maybe changing the hearts and minds of people about this type of housing? Because let's be honest, our own public sector employees, our own teachers
Cannot afford
to live in this
Right,
county.
right,
How do you have
right.
how do you get to a place where you have people working in the county who can't afford to live in the county?
Right.
So I think this is egregious, and this is something that we've got to fix. And I'm going to continue to push. Walter has been right there as well,
Okay.
looking for ways, public-private partnerships, looking at public space, thinking about, even with development, how can we ensure when we're redeveloping new facilities, we know how many residents are in affordable housing in that development today. No net
ensure
loss.
it. Yeah,
No
absolutely.
net
That's right.
loss.
I was just about to say.
So no
you,
net
you,
loss.
You can help that process.
No,
yeah.
it's already.
Right.
Oh no, this has already been
Okay,
determined.
okay.
This has
Okay.
already been determined.
Okay.
So I'm saying no net loss. So the last point I'll make, and I'll turn it over
Yeah.
to Walter, is that in my district I have two manufactured housing facilities. So these are basically mobile homes. One has 700 units and the second has 91. And Walter's been a part of this conversation with me as well. The one that's 91 just recently was acquired. And one of the things I tried very consistently to do in this particular project was to find a pathway for the residents of that mobile home park to be able to purchase it.
Right.
We got the county, this is amazing, first ever, the county agreed to support a not-for-profit, Catholics for Housing, in that acquisition of that particular mobile home park. Yeah, this was the problem though, and this is what we talked about, and Walter knows this, leverage.
Yeah.
The owner who ended up acquiring it is an entity out of North Carolina.
Okay.
They set their bid, and the owners who were selling were like, we want to take that because we know it's definitive, we know it's going to close
Right.
by the 31st.
Right.
And I said that we need to do something similar with the owner of that mobile home park, meaning the person that's trying to acquire it. We have to assume on both sides of the ledger, there's two ledgers here. One is the community being able to acquire it, and the other is this entity outside of North Carolina.
Right.
So could we do something to have leverage with that owner in saying that if we help you with the financing, will you ensure
Have
that
some
you won't?
commitment to the residents.
That's it.
Exactly it.
Yeah.
Right.
That's where we fell short.
Right.
We did.
That's where we
So,
fell short.
so that did not happen.
That did not happen,
And
and
so those-
it sold. So the project sold to this
Right.
entity out of North Carolina, and now I'm trying to negotiate. I'm negotiating with the owner right now, just
Wow.
trying to figure out what we can do
For those
to help
residents.
for those
Wow.
residents. I got one commitment. The
Right.
one commitment I got is that they will not raise the rents for 1 year. For 1 year.
It's a start.
It's a start.
It's a start, but we have a long way to go there.
I got a long way to go, but don't worry.
So,
I'm not done.
So let's talk about the other end
Yes.
of the county.
Yes. Yes.
Because those issues exist in your district as well.
Mm-hmm.
They may be more masked,
Yeah.
They do.
or
No.
better masked.
No, that's exactly
Yeah.
right. I mean,
Yeah.
we are in a different spot.
We are.
Part of the county that I represent. And Rodney and I have talked about this a lot.
Yeah.
Rodney's not,
Yeah.
on a Richmond Highway corridor, there's not been one Class A office building built in
That's right.
30 years.
30 years.
30 years.
Exactly.
We don't have that problem in Reston.
Yeah.
Right. You can turn some of those office buildings that are probably empty into affordable housing.
Well, see, that's right. That's what we're looking at is,
Right.
is
Exactly.
what tools do we have
Exactly.
at our disposal? We have policy tools,
Right.
but even more importantly, two things are needed for affordable housing.
Yep.
Land
Yep.
and money.
Let me ask you this.
That's exactly right.
And I've seen several articles lately, again, speaking about partnerships with the faith community.
Right. Yes.
You can't create new land.
Yes.
Yes.
But there are many,
Yes.
houses of faith
That's right.
that have land that's not being used.
Yes.
Yes.
Have you ever thought about,
Yes.
the possibilities
Yes.
of some partnerships with
Right.
with these institutions?
Yeah, absolutely. As,
Yep.
as a matter of fact, that's part of the strategy that Rodney mentioned earlier
Yep.
about
Okay.
public land.
That's
Gotcha.
right.
So it's public land and also land that's owned by faith
Okay.
communities.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
Underutilized land.
Gotcha.
Exactly.
I mean, basically.
That's a good point.
So there are a couple of announcements that are going to be coming out in the next month or so
Right.
in the 100 Mill District.
Right.
We did have one affordable housing announcement just last month. Dominion Square West project, Phase 1.
Right.
175 new units.
Yep.
The exciting thing about that one in particular,
Yep.
it's right by the Spring Hill Metro Station.
Okay.
It's within a quarter mile.
It's huge.
Right.
It's a big deal.
Right.
That is a
Right.
big deal.
It
And
is.
it's
Right.
it's important to remember, our growth strategy in this part of Fairfax County is
Right.
focused on transit-oriented development. And we have to make sure
Yeah.
that in those transit-oriented
Right.
areas, it's not just
Right.
housing for
Right.
people that
Time is getting away from
Yes.
us,
Yeah.
and there are a couple
Yes.
of issues I want to hit.
Okay.
So let's just transition a little
Yes,
bit.
sir.
So we've talked about
Yeah.
affordable housing, but
Yes.
there
Right.
is an increasing,
Yes.
level of growth in homelessness.
Yes.
Yes.
Here in Fairfax County.
Yes.
I would hope that there's some intentionality.
Yes.
And I know there's some not-for-profits working on this.
Yeah.
But, and perhaps they have county funding, but I hope that there are some programs that the county has
Yes.
that's trying to move these individuals, from these tent communities.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was just,
Yeah.
just 2 weeks ago,
Yeah.
in Reston.
Yes.
Yes.
They were highlighted.
That's right.
And it really broke my heart.
I know.
That there are people in Fairfax County
Yeah.
living in tents.
They are.
Yes, no, absolutely.
Yep.
And a couple things going on in Reston.
Right.
First of all, we have to get the Embry Rucker shelter rebuilt. Right
That's right.
now,
That's right.
it's getting to the point where
Yeah.
it's got some issues.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
we have to do that. The second thing we have to do is set up day services.
Yeah.
The shelter keeps
Right.
people overnight.
Right.
Yeah.
But what do they do during
During
the
the
day?
day.
Exactly.
Right.
You know, if they have their luggage and that's where
Right.
their belongings
Right.
are, where do
right.
they store them?
Okay.
You know, where can they plug in their phone?
Mm-hmm.
Where can they get skills
Exactly.
to perhaps get a job?
Yeah.
You know, and I
Yeah.
don't want to say that not every homeless person isn't working because we have so many homeless
do.
people
Right.
that
That
are
are
actually
working.
work.
Right.
full time.
Right.
Yeah.
And yet
right.
they can't afford
Yeah.
a place in Fairfax County.
Yeah.
That's not right.
It's
Yeah.
not.
And that's something we need to do something about on several levels.
One of the things that occurred to me
point.
recently, and I think it goes back to the point you made
Yes.
just a moment ago about the faces of those
Yes.
that were in the room when you said that you were one of those persons
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
in the free and reduced lunch
right.
on the free side.
Yeah.
And let me just not take for granted the historic nature of your election as well.
Yes.
You know,
Sure.
you're the first African American male
Yes.
to hold this position.
Yeah.
And I share that experience with you,
Yeah.
having been the first African American. We were called freeholders at the time. They've just
Wow.
recently changed the name to commissioners in Bergen County, New Jersey.
Probably a better name, actually.
It is much,
my gosh.
it is much better name.
Jeez.
Freeholders had
Yeah.
some other connotations to it, and so
Exactly.
finally we were
Good.
able to get that changed just
Sure.
in the midst of this COVID experience.
Got it.
But what I wanted to raise was,
Right.
you know, if it is not your lived experience, it is hard for people
Right.
to understand
Yes.
what is really happening.
Yes.
And when I heard about these tent communities
Yes.
right here in my
Yeah.
own backyard,
Yes.
I was compelled. And
Sure.
the day I heard about it happened to be one of the coldest nights
Yeah.
of this season. And I wondered
Yeah.
what it would be like for me
Right.
to be out there in a tent. And I'll be honest with you.
It's tough.
I was
It's tough.
I have been compelled.
Right.
I don't want to, you know, impose myself on anybody's community.
Right.
But I think, you know, one
Yes.
of the ways that we can become much more passionate and compassionate
Right.
about issues
Yeah.
if we place ourselves in somebody's shoes.
Yeah.
You know, I'm thinking about
Yeah.
a trip myself, and I would love to have you
Yeah.
guys join me.
I'd be willing to do that, for sure.
You would join me if I went out there at night.
I'm going to go with you.
All right.
Absolutely.
All right. I'm
I'm
committed.
going to hold you to it. And
Okay.
I really do think
Sure.
that we should encourage some others
Definitely.
to do it with us, and we can work through the details as such.
Happy to
And
do
I
that.
I appreciate that. So, police reform.
Okay.
One
Yeah.
quick thing
Yes.
on you
Yep.
know, Rodney and I were both on the planning commission
Uh-huh.
when Fairfax County started the hypothermia program.
Yes,
Which
yes.
was a big advance.
It was.
But it clearly doesn't go far enough.
Not far enough.
It does not go
Yeah.
far enough.
Yep.
And it
That's right.
also ends on March 31st.
Yes.
anyway,
So there's a whole,
Yep.
you know, the season where people are just out there.
Yes.
That's right.
Yeah.
Police reform.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, I guess one of the first topics that brought us together really was this whole idea of policing.
Yeah.
And in particular,
Definitely.
the police search.
Yes.
I don't want to get into a whole lot of detail about the police search, but needless to say, you both know
Yes.
that I was not satisfied with the
Sure.
search and the
Sure.
all of that which surrounded the search and the results of the search.
Yeah.
However, you all have the responsibility of
Yes.
managing
Yes.
the leadership.
Right.
So talk to us about what's
Yeah.
happening in terms of police reform. How are we doing? You know, we hired a candidate
We did.
because he was the reformed candidate.
Correct.
How are we doing in terms of reforms?
So we're working very diligently on those
Okay.
reforms. Just this past Tuesday, the board had its public safety and security meeting.
Okay.
We put together and paneled a community group to look at the recommendations of the University of Texas at San Antonio's survey and report on use of data from 2016, 17, and 18. So 3 years of data. They looked at that and they came back with some recommendations. And what I'll say is we learned some kind of not so great things.
Wow.
First is if you look at the application of use of force, in certain police districts, it is extraordinarily high. So let me tell you which ones.
Disproportionate.
disproportionately high for certain minority groups.
Right.
So let me clarify. So Mason, Mount Vernon, Lee are the ones that are pretty much at the top. So if you look at disparities and use of force against members of our African American community, our Latinx community, and then even to a smaller degree to our Asian community in some of these communities as well. So after we received the report from the University of Texas, we said we need to figure out how we go about implementing these recommendations. So the committee determined that we would set together a group from the community to help us in looking at them. The group presented on this past Tuesday their recommendations. I want to say they did an extraordinary job in terms of looking at the recommendations and parsing out which ones they felt should be, enacted immediately, but then they also did something else, which I thought was even more impressive, is they added additional recommendations to the recommendations from the University of Texas at Austin, and they sourced them.
Okay.
So they used data and research from other localities and other kind of professional police entities to help justify their recommendations. So what we've landed on is that now Chief Davis will receive that report from that community group, and we're going to start working on the implementation. And this is where Rodney, your member of the Board of Supervisors, who chairs the Public Safety and Security Committee, is going to be watching to ensure that we get those reforms, because that's what we need to do. We've got to address this issue of use of force, because this is the glaring elephant in the room with regard to Fairfax County. So the good thing is we're going to see changes, and I'll be clear in saying that the one that I'm most interested in is de-escalation. So if we think about what police officers do when they arrive on the scene, and the question is, are they going to use patience, time, distance, and cover before they start making any immediate decisions? And to me, patience is probably the most important one. Because we've seen in cases where patience wasn't used, what the outcome is. So we're going to get every officer trained. It's called Icat Training, and this is basically the de-escalation training that has been reviewed and determined through research that it improves the outcomes for officers.
So basically, we're at a place where we've received a report. The committee has met, and they have made some recommendations.
They have.
Based on the report. And so now we are looking
to implement those recommendations. And some
so
of
let me ask you this, because I know our time is really getting short.
That's fine.
Is those recommendations?
Yes, sir.
Were any of the recommendations based on the chairman's task force taken into consideration? I don't know if you are aware of that at that moment, because
actually one of the things in the chairman's task force is something Supervisor Lusk and I had championed. And it's basically changing the way we do first response to mental health crises and behavioral crises.
That's right.
Because right now, with almost no exception, we send a uniformed police officer to respond to all calls.
That's right.
And that is not a good de-escalation strategy whenever you're dealing with just mental health issues. People in mental health or behavioral crisis.
Or alcohol.
Exactly. So we just, at our mid-year budget, hired 23 new positions, new people, to basically be the seed of this program to change the way we do first respond. Because right now we've got fire and police, or fire and rescue, we got police. We need a third type of first responder
That's right.
in Fairfax County. And that's that will go so far to avoiding terrible outcomes. Not in everything, but together with these reforms that Rodney's talking about coming out of the
I think that's a good point, Walter, and I'll say this too. I mean, the idea here is we're not trying to put people at risk. So let's be careful here, because some people think the police not going on some of these calls is a bad idea. If there's no criminality and there's no threat of violence to the person or others, then we're okay with sending someone who has a behavioral health and substance abuse training to go in and help us de-escalate. Correct.
So clearly, we probably should have started here.
There's a lot to unpack
There's a lot to unpack here, but I know our time is up. So just quickly. Obviously, police reform, policing has been a hotbed issue.
Big issue.
And it was one of those issues where I think some trust was eroded. Tell us, members of First Baptist in the community,
Yes.
why they should trust this process now.
I'll
And
say-
you don't even have to look at me. You can look in the camera. Tell the community.
Okay,
why.
I'll
why.
look at the community and say,
Yeah.
we are committed to ensuring that we get the reforms that need to be made to make our police department better here in Fairfax County. We are committed to this, and I'll say personally, this is on me. And I said this to Pastor Walton. I said this to Pastor Walton when we first talked after the hiring of the chief of police. I said that I'm going to make sure that he's held accountable to ensuring that we get these improvements. And if we do not, then I'll be the first person that raises his hand and says he needs to go. I'm not there yet.
Right.
Not there yet. But if we get to a place where we're not getting the reforms that we need, my hand will go up and I'll be the first person that asks for it.
Thank you. Walter,
Yeah,
tell us
I was
finally.
just going to say,
Yeah.
I totally agree with Supervisor Lusk on that. I'm right there with him. But I want to tell you and your parishioners, don't trust us. Watch for yourself. Think for yourself. You know, make your own judgments on what needs to be done and if it's happening. And tell us. And tell the world. Because, you know, there's so many things that, if not exposed to the light, will continue the way they are. And I so appreciate the role that you have played in the community to highlight those things that have to be highlighted. So, you know, I am committed to reform, to making sure that we actually see these changes implemented that have to be made.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But don't take our words for it. Watch what we do.
We'll watch.
Watch the system.
Right.
And see if the system changes.
Well, as Reverend Al would say, gotcha. So we will be watching. We will be watching.
Good.
Seriously, thank you so much for your commitment. Thank you for your transparency today. As I said, there are many issues that we agree upon readily.
Yes.
Others we'll have to work through and keep talking about and talking through. But I believe we all have the heart and the interest of the community at hand. Thank you for your time today. Thank you for your service, and thank you for being a part of this justice and conversation. And we look forward to hearing more from these supervisors in the months and years that are to come. Stay tuned, my friends. There's more to come.
Thank you.
Thank you as well.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Enjoyed it.
Oh, man, that was rich.
These are your March-April announcements. Join us each weekday morning at 6 a.m. for morning meditation and continue at Tuesdays at 7 p.m. for legislative and justice conversations, followed by Pastor and the I Will series. And on Sunday, join us for CLA at 8 a.m. It's about that time. Join us for He's Alive. It's Lenten season. Pick up your copy at the church and join us in April for the Easter experience for the family. And we will also have a walkthrough Passion Week experience. Thank you for everyone who has completed connection groups. They had a wonderful time, and there is still time for you to join us for our march for the gift of serving, the gift of shepherding, and the gift of teaching. Continue to follow the pastor on his Facebook page, Instagram, and Twitter, as well as the church. Stay connected with us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. These have been your March-April announcements.